All right, you guys. So here's the deal. We're learning about how to write a system of equations. We're not focused on solving today. There are 4 key things that I'm going to be asking from you each system that I give you, each word problem, okay? I am going to use 3 different highlighters today, if you care to follow along with me. So we all love word problems, don't we? I'm going to hopefully give you guys some hints to guide you through breaking it apart and really figuring out what it says. So the first problem here we have is the sum of 2 numbers is 12. The difference is 4. And what are the values of the 2 numbers? Well, our steps up here say, what are you asked to find? Make these your variables. So the first thing you're always going to do is you're going to define your 2 variables because we have to have 2 variables if it's a system. So we need to have X and we need to have a Y to match, to put into our system of equations. The question in the word problem, the last part where it says, what are the values of the 2 numbers? That is always going to clue you in to what your variables will represent. It's asking, what are the values of the 2 numbers? So the X is going to be the first number, which would make Y the second number. Once you've established what your X and your Y are, it makes it a little bit easier to go back and now build your 2 equations. So the 2 equations are going to come from, there's going to be 2 comparisons or 2, I guess almost stories about those 2 variables that you already defined. So, or relationships is probably the better word I was looking for. So looking at my word problem again, the first sentence says the sum of the 2 numbers is 12. So that's one relationship that I know about of my 2 numbers. Sum is the outcome to an addition problem. Is always a keyword that it means equal, okay? So what this is saying is if I add my 2 numbers together, they would equal 12. Well, remember, X represents the first number and Y represents the second number. So this equation is exactly what I just said. If I add my 2 numbers together, they will equal 12. Now, the second relationship comes from that second sentence, and a lot of times you'll notice the sentences break up the 2 equations, okay? The second sentence says the difference is 4. So what that's saying is if I subtract the 2, because difference is the outcome of a subtraction, it will be equal to 4. So now I'm going to do X minus Y and set it equal to 4. And that's how I get my first 2 equations for that word problem, or my first word problem, the equations for it. Now, thinking ahead towards some attempts and things, that's where you stop. All you have to do is write the system. So I'm looking for you to identify what your variables are going to represent, and I want you to be as specific as you possibly can. And then I need to see your 2 equations that you built based on those variables, okay? So let's go through some more examples because they're not all going to look just like that, right? So here's our second problem. At an ice cream parlor, ice cream cones cost $1.10 and sundaes cost $2.35. Yesterday, the receipts showed a total of 172 purchases that totaled $294.20. How many ice cream cones and sundaes were sold? Remember, we always start with the end question. That's what's going to define our variables. So it says how many ice cream cones and sundaes were sold. That's going to tell us what our X and our Y are going to represent. The 2 things we're looking for is how many ice cream cones. So this X would be the number of ice cream cones sold, right? And then our Y, the second part is it's asking how many ice cream sundaes were sold. So this would represent the number of ice cream sundaes sold. Now notice I'm writing a lot there. That's good because I want to know in detail what is that representing. If you just wrote cones and sundaes, that doesn't tell me if that represents the cost of them. That doesn't tell me if that represents an amount of them. That doesn't tell me if it represents the temperature of them or the toppings. It doesn't tell me enough detail to really know what those variables are representing, okay? So as much detail as possible is what I need from you. Okay, I told you guys our two equations are always going to come from two relationships. Now in this problem, we were given two totals listed. So I first have a total number of purchases, and then I have a total amount of money. So one of my equations is going to represent the amount. The other one is going to represent the value or the money that it was worth. Okay. Now the money, there's other information in this word problem that does also go into the money problem or the money equation. I know that ice cream cones cost $1.10 and sundaes cost $2.35. We're going to incorporate that into our money equation. All right. So don't even think about equations right now, guys. Think about it realistically. If they said they sold 172 items, wouldn't that mean that the number of ice cream cones plus the number of sundaes sold would equal 172? Because that's how many total items. So that's our first equation. We have x plus y equals 172. That's just the number of cones plus the number of sundaes is equal to the total number of things that were purchased. Our second equation is all about that dollar amount, okay? So if it's saying that they made, anytime you say total, that's another equal sign I should put there. They made $294.20, right? So thinking about that, it says up here, every cone costs $1.10. So we're going to take the $1.10 and multiply it by the number of cones, because that's going to be how much money they brought in for cones. So we have $1.10 times the number of cones that they sold. Plus, the cost for the sundae was $2.35. So we're going to take that and multiply it by how many sundaes were sold. And then that will equal the total amount of money that they brought in. I hope that makes a little bit of sense. All right, ready for the next one. Mrs. Townsend is giving you a test worth 100 points, and it contains 40 questions. There are 2-point questions and 4-point questions on the test. How many of each type of question are on the test? So again, we're going to start with that question. It's asking us how many of each type of question are on the test. So we're looking for an amount again. So the number of, and it's asking us to tell us the number of each type of question. Well, let's look back at what the types of questions are. We were told that there are 2-point questions and 4-point questions. So this one's going to be the number of 2-point questions on the test, and the Y is going to represent the 4-point questions on the test. Now that I know X is representing the number of those questions, the number of 2 points, and the Y is representing the number of 4 points, I can build my equations. So my first equation comes from the first relationship that is shared. Okay, it says the test is worth 100 points. It also tells us that it has 40 questions. So our two equations are going to come from those two totals again. So the first one has to do with the point value, and the second one just has to do with the amount. Now, if there's a total of 40 questions, and the only types of questions that are on there are 2-point and 4-point questions, then that means if I add up the number of 2-point questions plus the number of 4-point questions, I should equal 40 questions. So my second equation this time is going to be my X plus Y equals 40. Now the first equation, I said it's going to be based on the point values. So this kind of has to do with the last, on our last problem when we put in the value of, or the cost for the ice cream. This one's going to have to do with the point values. So if the total points for the test is 100, Then I'm going to take the number of 2-point questions and I'm going to multiply it by 2 points because that's how much it's worth. So I have 2 times the number of 2-point questions plus how many points is the 4-point questions worth? It's not a trick question. 4 equals 100 points. All right, I'm going to do this last one with you guys, and then you're going to be kind of set up to try and do some on your own, okay? It says at the Apple Pan, 4 burgers and 3 fries cost $26.50. 5 burgers and 5 fries cost $36.25. What is the cost for each item? Thank you. All right. So again, this time we're looking for my X and my Y are going to represent the cost. So this would be the cost of something, and this would be the cost of something. It says we're trying to figure out the cost of each item. So what are the items we're talking about in this word problem? It looks like we're talking about burgers and fries. So the cost of a burger and the cost of fries are going to be our 2 variables, okay? Now our 2 equations come from our 2 relationships, right? This one, again, is kind of like our first one where each sentence gives us a different relationship. So it tells us this first order that there's 4 burgers and 3 fries and it costs that amount. Our second equation says 5 burgers and 5 fries cost this amount. So we're looking at 2 sentences, 2 equations for this one. 4 burgers, so 4 times the cost of a burger, plus Olaf. 3 times the cost of a fry, and it's going to be equal to the total tab. Now think about that realistically, guys. That seems kind of confusing, but when you go to order something like at McDonald's or whatever, don't you look at the price, and if you say I want 3 burgers, and they're on the dollar menu, you're going to say 3 times $1, and that would be $3, right? That's the same thing we're doing here. We're saying 4 times the cost of a burger plus 3 times the cost of a fries, and that's going to be my total bill. Same thing for the next equation. We have 5 burgers and 5 fries, and our total bill was $36.25. Now, we're not solving like I told you guys, but if you were to, when you solve for X, you know the answer is this is the cost of a burger. When you solve for Y, when you look back at your variables, you say, oh, that number is the cost of the fries. That's part of why that's a big part of why we define our variables before we even get started, so that we really focus in on what we're looking for, okay? All right, you guys, I am going to have you guys work on your own and kind of struggle through it. Do the same process that we did on the front side. So start with the question in mind. Identify your variables, be specific as possible, okay? Then go through and look for the 2 relationships that are shared about those variables. Okay, hold on. And then that's going to give you your 2 equations, all right? I will post another video or answer key maybe about what these answers are, but I want you guys to struggle through it first because it all sounds really easy when I'm going over it with you, but then when you get home, you always say like, oh gosh, I don't understand that at all, right? So we're going to do that. Now, real quick, I want to talk to you before I sign off. Monday, you guys are going to have 2 attempts. You're going to have a 3rd attempt on solving a system. Okay, great. And then you're going to also have a first attempt at setting up word problems. So be prepared for those 2 attempts on Monday. And then we will be doing a Google Slide practice activity after you do your 2 attempts. So you don't have any papers for Monday. And then whoever is your sub for today will give you your asynchronous, it's on a green paper, I think, assignment for next Tuesday. All right. Do your best. Go through the same process. I know this is tough, but if you break it up by the way I highlighted it, it should be a little bit easier as you work through, okay? All right, guys, have a good one.